Welcome to Mary McCorvey Experience Over Expectations podcast, which you can find on YouTube, Substack, and any place you find your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe today.
Hello, I'm Mary McCorvey, host of Experience Over Expectation, where we ask you, the listener and the viewer, to let go of the grand plan and live on your terms. Today we are welcoming Adaku Mbagwu. She calls herself the first-daughter Disruptor, and that phrase alone tells you that she's not afraid to shake up old stories. A Nigerian-born, Tulum-based transformational guide, Adaku works with high-achieving firstborn daughters, women who are often the backbone of everyone else's success stories, but quietly carry the exhaustion of being the strong one. Throughout her global community, Healed Hero, she helps them break through the burnout, perfectionism, and generational pressure to build success that actually feels good. That sounds great. I think we'd all like a little bit of that. Adaku, can you tell us a little, first of all, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
My background, career, as you said in the intro, I grew up in London from the age of 6, which is where the accent comes from. I now live in Tulum, Mexico, as of the beginning of the pandemic, so July 2020. So it's been 5 years living in Mexico. I'm one of 7 children. I'm the eldest girl of the 7, so second eldest. So had a lot of responsibility growing up. I played the second mum. It's interesting, in Nigeria, every firstborn daughter gets the name Ada, A-D-A, which means firstborn daughter. And then we have like something that follows, but we're seen as the second mum. So that it was kind of predestined that I was going to play a specific role before I even came out the chute. So the life in Nigeria and life in the UK, completely different night and day. I was born into a really abundant family and circumstance. We were like the royal family of our community. And then we moved to the UK and my mum really struggled. Childhood memories were pretty tough growing up. And I guess they served me in a way in terms of making me resilient, but created some patterns and behaviors that didn't serve me so much and ended up in me kind of falling into depression in my 20s and having a couple of failed suicide attempts. Thankfully, I'm here to tell the story, but
Thank goodness.
everything has served a purpose, and I wouldn't be who I am and where I am without those experiences. So I'm grateful, even though they were tough during the time. So,
Yeah, I would say so. So your culture from Nigeria carried over into your life in the UK, and that blending of cultures, how did you manage that growing up?
So it was interesting. Great question. I've always said that I don't feel British because I still grew up in a Nigerian household. So those expectations and the fact that my brothers were me, and so there's still certain cultural things that I carry forward. So it was always interesting to go and play with my friends or go to their houses and be like, you're allowed to do that and you can get away with that. That's not fair. What's going on? So it was an interesting contrast. And I think some of my siblings ventured out and wanted to kind of experience life out of those cultural boundaries. And I was Miss Goody Two Shoes, so as much as I could, I stayed within them and was obedient. Yeah, it was a contrast, but I think as a family, we're on one way, we're pretty grounded in the cultural expectations, but my mum was a little bit of a black sheep. So when we go back to Nigeria, there's a lot of traditional things that we don't know because we just weren't taught. And because she didn't have any money, we didn't visit Nigeria often because we couldn't, to learn about certain traditions in terms of how you bury someone, what happens when you get married. All of those things are not part of our upbringing.
So have you found in other cultures, for example, in the UK and in Mexico, have you found that the first daughter position is consistent? Do you find that the first daughters tend to carry that burden that you described?
Yes, I think to maybe varying degrees. A lot of the clients I work with who are from immigrant families living in the West or are in African cultures or other foreign cultures outside of the West tend to have a little bit more of the explicit expectation, whereas in the West, it's kind of, it's not as explicit. So it's not kind of said, well, you're the to get over it, or this is your role. That's not happening, but the expectation is there inherently. So there's this sense of responsibility. It's interesting. There's some research that's starting to come out on eldest-daughter syndrome, they've called it. And what I've seen is that every firstborn daughter, whether you're the only girl, whether you're the youngest of four boys, you could be the baby of the family, but the firstborn daughter seems to take on that burden of responsibility, and they learn how to sacrifice themselves for others and put people first, and not necessarily know how to speak up or share what they need, and they often feel invisible. So those attributes and traits seem to kind of apply to pretty much every firstborn daughter that I interact with.
Mm-hmm. And tell me, how does that reflect on your feeling toward your siblings? And full disclosure here, I am thinking about my sister who is older than I. I'm the younger one. And I mean, I'm the youngest. It's clear that I'm the youngest one. Anyway, I'm thinking about her and the life that she's lived and the responsibilities that she took on as the eldest daughter. And this is in the United States. Although she did marry, actually, she married a Cuban man who the intricacies of that culture also reflect the kinds of expectations that you're talking about as well. So she had a double dose. She had the firstborn syndrome. She's never going to let me get away with it, not calling her the firstborn syndrome anymore. But she really did. She worked very, very hard on things that I did not have to. And I'm very grateful to her for doing that. How does the sibling relationship work in the kinds of cases that you've experienced, both yourself and with clients?
So it differs it differs based on the person that I'm speaking to, but some of the trends that I see is that a lot of firstborn daughters who are eldest daughters see their siblings as their children, so they have this deep care for them. Sometimes that deep care may come across as controlling tendencies, but it's from love. But it's kind of like, oh, I want to protect you, and if you listen to me, then you'll be great. I see you nodding your head, so maybe your sister. And as they grow older, I think that what I have found is the reason why a lot of firstborn daughters feel underappreciated, invisible, or not acknowledged is because they've been playing that role for so long. It's almost expected that they do those things rather than beautiful to hear that you are grateful and you really appreciate it. But I think a lot of the frustrations that I see later on in life is that they feel like they're sacrificing so much, and everyone takes for granted how much they're sacrificing because it's just something that is done because they've gotten so used to it. So that usually builds resentment and frustration, and it can cause conflict. It did with me. We had to work through that because I kind of felt like, because I was playing the motherly role, a lot of my siblings had their motherly trauma towards me, so that there was anger coming towards me. And I'm like, you do realize I was 12 when I was raising you? I acknowledge and I apologize for anything I did that hurt your feelings, but I was a baby, and there's no kind of space to acknowledge that. So that usually causes a lot of tension between firstborn daughters and their families. And some firstborn daughters go to the extent of completely disassociating and cutting their family off because they just can't emotionally contain the dynamic or the feeling of not feeling loved in the way that they would want to be loved. The thing that every firstborn daughter will never say out loud is that they just want to be taken care of. But because they're so used to being hyper independent, it feels way too vulnerable to just share that. So they just keep giving, and they're seeking or desiring reciprocity or for people to show up for them in the same way. And they haven't trained people to do that. So yeah, it can cause some tension.
Well, there, and as I was mentioning, my daughter, I mean, my
Sister.
sister, she is a give person. And sometimes, from my standpoint, I feel like I am deeply appreciative, but I don't really know how to show it. I don't really know how to convey the gratitude that I have. Do you run across those kinds of circumstances where, there can be conflict because of the desire for communication, but just completely different perspectives?
Absolutely. So I had a coaching call with some of the women in the community yesterday, and one of them came on the call and she was angry at her fiance. And I asked her, what did he do? And she said, well, he's been away for 2 weeks and he came back and he went to golf for a few hours. And I said, okay, well, what's really going on? She was like, well, why can't he prioritize me? And I said, does he know that you want him to prioritize you? And she was like, well, he should. And I said, well, how, like, is this a pattern? She was like, we've been together for 10 years and he keeps doing the same thing. And we kept going back and forth, and she was communicating in her anger because this has built up frustration because she keeps finding evidence that no one shows up for her like she shows up for them. And I said to her, I'm going to hazard a guess at what you are feeling and you tell me whether I'm right. And she said yes. And I said, you are sad when he leaves, and when he comes back, you want him to take initiative to show you that he's missed you and to let you know that he wants to spend time with you through his actions. She was like, well, yeah. I said, he doesn't know that, so can you maybe communicate that and say, hey, I really miss you when you're away, and every time you come back, I would love to spend some time. She was like, well, it sounds so easy when you say it and so lovely when you say it. I'm like, it is easy, but because they're so used to giving, it's something that seems so simple to other people in terms of just answer what you need. They don't know how to do it. They just want, because I can imagine that your sister knows how to anticipate the needs of others. She doesn't really need to be asked, and she just shows up and gives. That's kind of what she wants, but she doesn't realize that it's a superpower for her. So if there was so for example, I've just had surgery 3 weeks ago, still in recovery, and it's been really difficult. And my friends keep texting me saying, let me know if you need anything. And I'm like, why do I need to let you know? Why can't you just show up? If you were sick, I would just show up. And I had to really kind of work through that and share with them, this is kind of what I expect. I expect you guys to just show up at the house and cook me some food because you know that I don't have energy, rather than me having to tell you. It feels so foreign to me that it takes so much energy to get. I can understand how that might be frustrating for you because you're like, I love her so dearly and I'm so grateful and I want to be able to show that, but everything I do seems wrong, and because I don't know how, I don't do anything because I might do it wrong, or it becomes this complicated thing, whereas she was able to, which is not easy for her, just say, hey, loving me looks like, and then tells you. I'm sure you'd be able to show up in that.
That's really insightful, and thank you very much for that. It also prompts the question, if you are, a parent yourself of a daughter, whether it's the only daughter or a daughter of one of several, what advice do you give? Well, do you have daughters?
I don't.
No? So what advice would you give for parents for
My
their
siblings,
daughters?
not my children. So it was actually my clients asking for coaching about their dynamic with their firstborn that got me to niche on firstborn, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a generational thing. It just keeps happening. And what I started to realize is that when a woman has her first daughter, and this is still new as I'm looking for patterns, what typically starts to happen is that there's a lot of expectation put on that relationship with that. It's going to make me feel this way, this is how it's going to look, and all of those expectations are inadvertently put on that little girl. So a lot of the times what I hear is that my client told me last week that her daughter said to her, "I'm never good enough for you," which broke my heart. So she's feeling these expectations. And as I started coaching my client through it, she started realizing when both of her daughters do the exact same thing, she gets triggered by the eldest, but she doesn't get triggered by the youngest. So we're looking at what is it that you have that, because if they're doing the same thing and you're getting triggered by one and not the other, there's an expectation that's not being met with the oldest. And if we can resolve that within you, then you can show up as loving as you do with your youngest, with the eldest. And I think it's really around looking at how, as a parent, how you can be responsible for those those kind of subtle expectations that you have. Like, you're the responsible one. You should be an example for your siblings. You should, all of those harmless, they seem, statements or expectations that are placed then creates this, I have to be perfect, so I can't fail. And they're kids, they're learning as they go. So it's how do you proactively give them permission to be imperfect and to be unique and to figure out their own identity outside the expectations of who they should be as eldest children, because that's what starts to kind of break them down and doubt themselves and try to fit a perfection mold to make their parents happy, and keep working harder and harder, hoping that will result in love and approval.
Well, this is really great advice. I can think of a conversation that I'm going to have with my daughter about this. She's an only child. But I do want to have this conversation with her and explore the dynamics that you're discussing here. For example, in the household she grew up in, there were two entrepreneurs. And so she has grown up with, and both of her parents worked at home. So she's grown up with a model of a work ethic that she still does carry today. And I want to know, is that something that she felt thrust upon her, or whether she just inculcated it into her?
I think the worst thing that can happen from this conversation is for make themselves a bad parent, and that's always the kind of
No.
for the listeners, hopefully,
Yeah.
So I think it would be interesting to speak to her, because sometimes there might be expectations, like if both of my parents are entrepreneurs and they may want me to become an entrepreneur, but I'm sure entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. So I always say you must have to have a little bit of a screw loose to choose entrepreneurship, because it
So
will throw
true.
all sorts of things at you. So I think maybe you can be proud of the fact that you've built such a resilient young lady that can handle entrepreneurship. Where the firstborn daughter trait can be limiting in entrepreneurship is that they tend to not be good at truly delegating and building an ecosystem of support. So they're always overworked, overwhelmed, on the verge of burnout. These are typical. In terms of her relationship with you, I think it would be an interesting thing to have a conversation and be open. Because I don't know your daughter, I wouldn't want to assume that she felt like it was thrust upon her, but she might have felt an expectation indirectly. I think we're always trying to make our parents proud, whether they tell us that they have an expectation or not. We anticipate. I have a cousin who's a firstborn daughter, and she says that she feels more pressure than her brothers to make her parents proud. And I said, have they actually said to you that you need to do specific things to make them proud? And she's like, actually, no. I was like, yeah. So you might want to give yourself a break or check in with them to, so I, I can't answer that for in terms of your daughter. You'll need to speak to her and
Oh,
have
of
her.
course, of
Yeah.
course. I'm just really interested to have the conversation. We have a very open relationship,
Beautiful.
and so we just never talked about this particular topic, and she has from day one made me extremely proud. So so we're good, but strong women carry with them a mantle of strength. And, the kind of healing that we're talking about, which is opening doors and having conversations and thinking about unrealistic expectations or expectations that don't even exist, right? It makes healing sound hard and but soft at the same time. And your work proves the absolute opposite. It takes courage and discipline in order to really attack these issues and resolve it. How do you help ambitious women embrace healing without feeling like they've lost their edge?
You ask some really good questions. Okay. So I have a framework that I use with firstborn daughters called the Strategic Vulnerability Framework. And I am able to demonstrate to them, like you said, that there is an automatic thought that vulnerability is weakness. But if vulnerability requires you to be courageous, then surely it's strength. And then I help them see that a lot of the time, because they relate to vulnerability as weakness, they start off pretty armored. It's like, I don't have any issues. I can handle it all. I'm totally fine by myself. But deep down, they are struggling to keep their head above water. They're feeling overwhelmed. They're dealing with anxiety. They're dealing with all of these things, and nobody knows. So in order for them to achieve their goals, I always say that life reflects to us. And if there is something that's not working, whether it's in our relationships, in our health, in our finances, in our business, there's something about the way we're showing up that demonstrates that. So the first level of strategic vulnerability is being able to be courageous enough to admit the part you're playing in what you're creating in your reality. And if you can say, so for example, before I had my breakdown, I realized that I would yo-yo with money. I would make a lot of money and lose it. And when I started doing the work, I was like, I want to look at that pattern. Why am I making so much money and then going broke? And I realized that when I made a lot of money, I had this pressure that I had to fix everyone's problems. So I would just give it away and we'll fix everyone's problems. So then when I wanted a break, rather than saying no, I just had a valid excuse to say, look, I have no money. I can't. So I would make myself broke in order for me to get a rest from having to help people.
Fascinating.
Right?
Yeah.
So all of these things are happening unconsciously. And 95% of everything we do is run by our subconscious. The first level is to be able to dig deep and see, okay, well, what decisions did I make in my past? And how has that created rules in how I'm engaging in life in my present that is not getting me the results that I want? Once I can see that, the next level is to start sharing with people, whether it's a therapist, a coach, friends, business colleagues, in order for you to start identifying who can help you and how they can help you. And there's a magical thing about vulnerability in that it connects us to others. So people who are not vulnerable don't really have deep relationships. Like you said, you have a really open relationship with your daughter, and that ability to share everything is what bonds you. And if you're not sharing with people, you have pretty superficial relationships, even in business. I think people say, well, what if people use my vulnerability against me? Or what if it backfires? I'm like, I don't see, if you're not staying a victim and you're sharing from a place of forward and work on this, I tend to find that it's endearing and people become your advocates and people want to work with you. But if you're sharing just to share and to get attention from sharing, which can also be a way that we receive love subconsciously, then you might start seeing that it's not yielding positive outcomes. First level is internal awareness. Second level is being able to share. And then in the sharing, you're going to be asking for help. And then the third level is to learn how to receive. So once you start learning how to ask for help and receive, which is uncomfortable for firstborn daughters specifically, because their fear is, if I ask you and you reject me, that's going to really, really hurt, because I know how much I give, especially if it's in a situation that they give. So there's a big threat, or if I allow people to help me to the extent I need help, I might lose control. And we're used to having things in control because we want things to be perfect. So that's a level of vulnerability. But no one in this world, there's an African proverb that you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So in anything we want to build or create, we need an ecosystem of support. So the next level of vulnerability is learning to trust people, or to select the right people that can hold you up and pour into you. And then that's when you get to magnetic authenticity, which is vulnerable in itself, because you become visible, you start being seen, you're scared of being judged, you're scared that you're going to be too much. And the part of us that wants to be part of tribe doesn't want to be too out there or too different, because we might get rejected. And to our primal brain, that means that we'll be at risk of dying. So in order for us to truly achieve success in business, it's imperative to be vulnerable, because all of those elements that we've spoken about are key to making sure that you have success that's sustainable and can be in terms of growth.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I have one final question for you as we wrap up here. Give me an example of a firstborn daughter who has been through the process that you just described and actually has reached a point where she's able to accept support.
Okay. One of my clients, who is now a business partner as well as a client, Shirley, she came to me 3 years ago now. And when she came to me, she had had her business for 8 or 9 years. She's based in California. She has a recovery consultancy, addiction recovery consultancy. And she had plateaued at 160K in revenue. And she just could, no matter how much more she did, she just couldn't break that ceiling. So when she came to me, she said, I'm fine. I've got no problems. The only problem I've got is the business. If you can help me with the business, I'm fine. Work like that. Let's look at the past. Let's look at what is there and how it might be showing up. So she shared that she had been sexually assaulted at a young age. And I asked her, she's been married for over 20 years. She had not told her husband that. So no one knew. There were so many things that no one knew about her. So this is what I'm talking. Even in her marriage, there was still barriers to connection. And she explained that she was an immigrant child of Asian parents. And because her dad was a janitor of a private school, she got to go to private school, but her dad was a janitor. So she felt embarrassed being with these wealthy children, and she was poor. So she always felt like she didn't belong. Like the fact that she got molested meant that she wasn't accepted as a child, and she wasn't safe in school. She didn't feel safe because she didn't fit in, and she didn't feel like she was accepted. So as we started looking at how that might be manifesting in her business, we realized that having certain conversations where she would anticipate that she wouldn't be accepted, or she might be judged, and she would hire people and say that they weren't good enough, so she might as well do things on her own. So she was doing everything. She would hire people, fire people, do things on her own, and that was a pattern. And when we looked deeper, we realized that she was hiring people that needed her because she felt good being needed, because she's been needed all her life. Her parents needed her to translate everything. She was taking care of her little brother. She was the responsible one. So in her business, she would hire projects that she needed to fix rather than people who can actually add value to her. So within 8 months, we started taking action on all these things we were realizing. She was having private conversations with her friends, sharing all of these things that she had hidden from them, which was really difficult for her, as well as taking really bold actions in her business. And within 8 months, we grew it to 800,000 in revenue. She's crossed the million now. We're aiming and all she's doing is looking at her blocks at every stage to see how her behavior or the way that she's showing up is getting in the way of what is available in terms of the business. So
What a great story. That has to be such a great feeling of success for you. And now she's your business partner. Congratulations to you.
thank you. Yes, this I feel very lucky. I pinch myself like this. I get to do this for work, really? Yeah, it's very fulfilling.
Thank you, Adaku, for being here today. We really, really appreciate it, and it's been a remarkable show. Thank you so much.
I've really
That's
enjoyed it.
that's Experience Over Expectation for today. I'm Mary McCorvey, also author of Experience Over Expectation, Let Go of the Plan, Live on Your Terms. Pick it up at Amazon or anywhere you get your books. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and we will see you next time.
You've been listening to Mary McCorvey's Experience Over Expectations podcast. Be sure to subscribe today on YouTube and Substack, or listen wherever you find your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in.